The alarm screamed through the starward Hope like a wounded animal. Jack Cole dropped his coffee cup and ran toward the bridge, his boots pounding against the metal floor. He had been on enough ships to know that sound. It meant trouble. Captain Ben stood at the main console, his face pale under the red emergency lights. On the viewing screen, a ship filled the entire frame. It was massive, dark, and covered in sharp angles that looked like the shell of some giant insect. Jack felt his stomach drop. "Ani warship," Ben said quietly. "They came out of nowhere." Amy worked frantically at her communications station, her fingers flying across buttons. "They're not responding to any of our hails, Captain. I've tried every frequency." The Ani. Jack had heard stories about them during his time in the military. They ruled 12-star systems with iron claws. They had conquered dozens of species, and they did not negotiate with those they considered beneath them. The Starward Hope was just a cargo vessel, 7 crew members, no weapons worth mentioning. They carried medical supplies to outer colonies. They were nobody important. "Maybe they'll just scan us and move on," said Danny Price, the youngest crew member. His voice shook with hope that everyone knew was foolish. A loud clang echoed through the ship, then another. The Ani were attaching boarding tubes. "Everyone stay calm," Ben ordered. "We cooperate, we answer their questions, we give them whatever they want. Understood?" Jack nodded along with the others. He had seen combat before, back when he served as a military medic. He knew when to fight and when to survive. This was a time to survive. The main door to the bridge exploded inward. Jack threw his arm over his face as hot air rushed past him. When he looked up, he saw them. The Ani warriors were tall, nearly 7 feet, with bodies covered in hard plates that shined like polished metal. Their heads were triangular, with large compound eyes that reflected the emergency lights in 100 tiny points. Their mouths were surrounded by sharp mandibles that clicked together as they moved. There were 6 of them. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. Behind them came another figure, taller than the rest, with armor that was darker and more decorated. This one moved with the confidence of command. "Down," the commander said in broken galactic common. "All down." The crew dropped to their knees. Jack kept his hands visible. He watched as the warriors moved through them, binding their wrists with glowing energy cuffs that felt warm against his skin. The commander pulled out a small device and began scanning each crew member. He passed it over Ben, then Amy, then Danny. Each time the device made a soft beep. When he reached Jack, the device let out a sharp, high tone. The commander's compound eyes narrowed. He scanned Jack again, the same sharp tone. "This one," he said. He turned to his warriors. "The Queen demands this one." Jack's heart stopped. "What, why me?" The commander did not answer. He grabbed Jack by the arm and pulled him to his feet. Jack was strong, but the Ani warrior was stronger. It was like being held by a machine. "Wait," Amy shouted. She tried to stand, but a warrior pushed her back down. "You can't just take him. What do you want with him?" The commander ignored her. Ben struggled against his bonds. "Listen to me. Whatever you want, we can talk about it. He's part of my crew. You can't just—" "The Queen demands," the commander repeated. "Her word is law." Jack was dragged toward the door. He looked back at his crew, at their frightened faces. Amy was crying. Danny looked like he might be sick. Ben's jaw was tight with helpless anger. "I'll find you," Ben called out. "Do you hear me, Jack? We'll find you." Then Jack was through the door and being pulled down the corridor of his own ship. His mind raced. The Queen. What Queen? Why would any Ani Queen care about a simple human medic on a cargo vessel? They brought him to the boarding tube and pushed him through. On the other side was a shuttle, sleek and dark. More warriors waited inside. They strapped him into a seat and the shuttle detached from the Starward Hope with a soft shudder. Through a small window, Jack watched his ship grow smaller. He had lived on that vessel for 3 years. It was his home, and now it was disappearing into the black. The shuttle flew toward the warship, but it did not dock. Instead, it continued past, heading toward something else. Jack pressed his face to the window and felt his breath catch. An orbital palace hung in space ahead of them. It was enormous, larger than any station Jack had ever seen. It was shaped like a spiral shell, with thousands of lights glowing along its surface. Parts of it were covered in something green and living. The whole structure slowly rotated, creating its own gravity. The commander who sat across from Jack noticed him staring. "The home of Queen Ra," he said, "ruler of the Ani Empire. You should feel honored, human. Few of your kind have seen this place." "And how many of them left alive?" Jack asked. The commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. His mandibles clicked together. "None." The shuttle landed inside a massive hangar. Jack was pulled from his seat and marched through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were made of something that looked like hardened resin, carved with images of battles and conquests. Ani of all sizes moved around them, stopping to stare at the human prisoner. Warriors lined the final corridor. There were hundreds of them standing perfectly still, their weapons ready. They watched Jack with their strange eyes, and their mandibles clicked in a rhythm that sounded almost like anticipation. At the end of the corridor stood two enormous doors. They were carved with scenes of a single figure standing above countless others, a queen crushing her enemies beneath her feet. The commander stopped. He looked down at Jack. "Whatever happens," he said, "do not speak unless the queen allows it. Do not move unless the queen allows it. Do not breathe too loudly. Understand?" Jack nodded. The doors began to open slowly, revealing darkness beyond. Sounds drifted out, clicking, hissing, and something else. Something like breathing from a creature far too large. Jack had faced death before. He had worked on soldiers with their bodies torn apart. He had made choices that saved some lives and lost others, but he had never felt fear like this. He stepped forward into the darkness, and the doors closed behind him. The darkness did not last long. As Jack walked forward, lights began to glow around him. They came from plants that grew along the walls and ceiling, giving off a soft blue and green shine. Pools of dark liquid sat between pathways of polished stone. The air was warm and thick, like a jungle after rain. Jack realized he was not alone. On raised platforms along both sides of the chamber, hundreds of Ani watched him. They were different from the warriors. Smaller, with softer colors on their shells. Nobles, Jack guessed. The ruling class of an empire that stretched across the stars. They clicked and hissed as he passed. Some leaned toward each other, speaking in their own language. Jack could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Curiosity, disgust, amusement. At the center of the chamber, he saw the throne. It was built from something that looked like golden crystal, twisted and shaped into a seat fit for a giant. And on that throne sat Queen Ra. She was enormous, twice the size of the warriors who had captured Jack. Her body was covered in plates that shimmered with deep purples and greens like oil on water. Her eyes were larger than the others, and they seemed to glow with their own inner light. When she moved even slightly, the entire chamber fell silent. A device floated near her head. When she spoke, her voice came out in harsh clicks and tones, but the device translated her words into something Jack could understand. "Human," she said, "you served as a healer among your warriors." Jack swallowed. He remembered the commander's warning about speaking without permission, but she had asked him a question, so he answered. "Yes, I was a military medic for 7 years." "You treated the wounded and dying." "I did." The queen leaned forward slightly. The movement made several nobles step back in surprise. "Our records show that humans have great knowledge of disease and infection. Your species has survived plagues that would have destroyed lesser races." Jack did not know where this was going, but he nodded. "We've faced many diseases throughout our history. We learned how to fight them." "Good," The queen raised one of her arms and made a gesture. A section of the wall behind her began to open. "Then you will help us." Beyond the wall was another chamber. Jack could see it through the opening. It was filled with soft materials and warm light, and inside were hundreds of small creatures, each one no bigger than a human child. They had soft shells that had not yet hardened and tiny mandibles that clicked weakly. Larvae Ani children. Many of them were moving strangely, twisting and shaking. Some lay completely still. Caretakers, adult Ani with gentle movements, moved among them with obvious distress. "A sickness has come to our nurseries," the queen said. Her voice was flat, but Jack could hear something underneath it. Pain, fear. "It kills our young before they can grow. Our healers have tried everything. Nothing works. Every day more die." Jack stared at the nursery. Despite everything, despite being kidnapped and threatened, he felt his training take over. He looked at the sick larvae with the eyes of a medic. "What are the symptoms?" he asked. A murmur ran through the nobles. Someone had spoken to the queen without waiting for permission. But the queen did not seem angry. She waved her arm, and more information appeared on floating screens around the chamber. "They stop eating. Their movements become uncontrolled. Then they become still and die within days. We have lost thousands." Jack studied the information. He did not understand all of it, but he could see the patterns. The infection spread fast. It attacked the nervous system, and nothing the Ani had tried could stop it. "Why me?" he asked. "Your empire has conquered countless worlds. You must have doctors and scientists far more advanced than anything I know." The queen's mandibles clicked. It might have been frustration. "We have studied the parasite. It is not from any world we have conquered. It came from somewhere else. Our medicine does not recognize it." She paused. "But we have intercepted human medical records. Your species faced something similar long ago, a fungal infection on one of your colony worlds. You stopped it." Jack remembered reading about that. The outbreak on New Eden, decades before he was born. It had killed thousands before human doctors found a treatment. The solution had come from an unusual source, compounds created by the human immune system itself. "You want me to cure your children," Jack said slowly. "I demand it." From somewhere behind Jack, a voice called out in anger. He turned to see the commander who had captured him stepping forward. "My queen," the commander said, "this is shameful. We are Ani. We do not ask lesser species for help. We take what we need. We do not beg." Several nobles clicked in agreement. The queen's eyes fixed on the commander. For a moment, the chamber seemed to grow colder. "Commander," she said, "I have ruled this empire for 300 years. I have crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. Do you think I do not know shame?" Lowered his head slightly but did not back down. "The other races will see this as weakness. They will think we can be challenged." "Let them think what they wish." The queen turned back to Jack. "My children are dying. I will do whatever is necessary to save them, even if it means asking a human for help." She rose from her throne. The movement was slow and heavy, like a mountain deciding to walk. She moved toward Jack until she towered over him, close enough that he could see his own reflection in her massive eyes. "Save my children, human, and you and your crew will be free. You will have the protection of the Ani Empire for the rest of your lives." Jack felt the weight of her words. "And if I fail?" The queen did not blink. "Then your species will learn what happens to those who disappoint me, starting with your ship, starting with your friends." Jack thought of Amy, of Ben, of Danny and the others. They were probably still on the Starward Hope, waiting, hoping he would come back. He looked at the nursery again, at the sick larvae twisting in pain. They were alien. They were strange. Their species had conquered and killed countless others. But they were also just children. "I'll need my crew," Jack said. "I'll need equipment, and I'll need access to everything your healers have learned about this disease." The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she made a sound that might have been approval. "You will have what you need. Do not waste my time, human, and do not fail." She turned and walked back to her throne. The audience was over. Jack stood alone in the center of the chamber, surrounded by enemies, holding the fate of an empire in his hands. He had no idea if he could do this, but he knew he had to try. The crew of the Starward Hope arrived at the orbital palace 2 days later. Jack was waiting for them in the laboratory the Queen had given him. When the doors opened and Amy walked through, she ran straight to him and threw her arms around his neck. "You're alive," she said into his shoulder. "We thought they killed you." "Not yet," Jack said. He looked past her at the others. Ben was there, looking tired but alert. Danny stood behind him, eyes wide as he stared at the strange room around them. The other 3 crew members, older technicians named Carl and Sam, followed close behind. "What is this place?" Ben asked. "What do they want from you?" Jack spent the next hour explaining everything. The Queen, the sick larvae, the demand. By the time he finished, everyone was silent. "So if you can't cure their kids, they destroy our ship and kill us all," Carl said. He rubbed his face with both hands. "That's just great." "We're going to do it," Jack said. "We have to." Ben walked to the window and looked out at the palace grounds below. Ani of all sizes moved along pathways and between buildings. Guards watched the laboratory from nearby posts. "I've been looking at this place," Ben said quietly. "There are shuttle bays on the lower levels. If we could get to one during a shift change, we might be able to steal a ship." "And go where?" Amy asked. "Their warships are everywhere. We wouldn't make it past the first checkpoint." "Better than sitting here waiting to die." Jack shook his head. "I'm not running, Ben. You didn't see those larvae. They're suffering. They're just kids." "They're aliens, Jack. Their species has killed millions, conquered entire worlds. Why should we care about their children?" "Because someone has to." The room went quiet. Jack and Ben stared at each other. They had known each other for years. They had disagreed before, but never about something like this. Finally, Ben sighed. "Fine, we'll try it your way first, but if things go bad, we run," agreed. Jack nodded. "Agreed. Now help me figure this out." The work began. Amy took over communications, working with the Ani databases to translate medical records into something the humans could understand. Danny, despite his fear, turned out to be good at organizing information. The others helped where they could. Jack spent most of his time in the nursery studying the sick larvae directly. The Ani caretakers watched him with suspicion at first. They were smaller than warriors, with softer shells and gentle movements. In Ani society, they were the lowest class. Their only job was to care for the young. A caretaker named became his guide. She was old for her kind, with faded colors on her shell and slow movements. But her eyes were sharp, and she knew every larva in the nursery by name. "This is," she said, pointing to a small larva that lay too still. "He was the strongest of his group. Now he cannot even lift his head." Jack knelt beside the small creature. Up close, he could see it breathing, shallow and weak. Its tiny mandibles clicked softly, almost like a human child whimpering. "How long has he been sick?" 4 days. Most do not last more than 6. Jack took samples and brought them back to the laboratory. He worked through the night, studying the parasite under alien microscopes. Amy stayed with him, bringing him food he forgot to eat and water he forgot to drink. "You need to sleep," she said as the hours passed. "I'll sleep when this is done." By the 3rd day, Jack had an idea. The parasite attacked the nervous system, but it had a weakness. It could not survive in certain chemical environments, and humans naturally produced a compound in their bone marrow that created exactly that environment. The outbreak on New Eden had been stopped with medicine made from human donors. The colonists had given their own bone marrow to create the cure. "I can make a treatment," Jack told the Queen when she summoned him for a report. but I need something that only humans can provide." "What do you need?" "Bone marrow from a living human donor." The Queen tilted her head. "You wish to harm one of your crew members?" "No, I'll use my own." The nobles around the chamber clicked in confusion. Even, who had been allowed to attend, seemed surprised. "The process is painful," the Queen said. "Our records show it requires pushing a needle deep into your bones." "I know what it requires. I've done it before when I was a medic. I helped other soldiers donate to save their friends." Jack kept his voice steady. "I'll do it for your children too." The Queen was silent for a long moment. Her massive eyes studied Jack as if seeing him for the first time. "You would suffer for creatures that are not your own kind. They're children, that's enough." The procedure happened the next day. The Ani surgeons were skilled but clearly uncomfortable. They had never worked on a human before. Jack lay on a table and guided them through it, telling them where to insert the needle, how deep to go. The pain was worse than he remembered. It felt like fire spreading through his hip and down his leg. He gripped the edges of the table and forced himself to breathe. Amy held his hand through all of it. "You're crazy," she whispered. "You know that, right?" "Probably," he admitted through gritted teeth. They extracted enough marrow to begin testing. Jack recovered slowly while Amy and Danny prepared the samples. Within hours, they had created a small amount of treatment. They tested it on 3 of the sickest larvae. Jack watched, exhausted and still in pain, as the medicine was given. By morning, all 3 were moving again, eating again. Their caretakers wept with joy, a sound like soft rain on metal. "It works," said. She approached Jack and did something no caretaker had ever done to a non-Ani. She bowed her head. "You saved them." But the celebration was short. A message came from the noble quarters. Commander had been busy during the past days. He had been speaking to traditionalist nobles, warriors who believed the Queen had grown weak. "She begs humans for help," told them. "She lets lesser creatures into our sacred nurseries. This is not the way of our ancestors. This is not the way of the strong." Support grew each day. The more larvae Jack saved, the angrier the traditionalists became. They did not want to be saved by a human. They would rather let their children die than accept help from prey. Jack stood at the nursery window, watching and the other caretakers tend to recovering larvae. Outside, he could see warriors gathering in small groups, looking toward the Queen's chambers. "Something bad is coming," Amy said, standing beside him. Jack nodded. "I know, but we're not finished yet. There are still hundreds of sick larvae. I need more time." "I don't think time is something we have." In the distance, alarm bells began to ring. The first explosion shook the palace like an earthquake. Jack grabbed a table to keep from falling. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Red lights flashed along the walls. "What's happening?" Danny shouted. Ben was already at the door, looking out into the corridor. Ani were running in all directions. Some wore the armor of the Queen's guards. Others wore the darker armor of Commander's warriors. "It's a coup," Ben said, "is making his move." Another explosion closer this time. The lights flickered. Jack could hear weapons fire, the sharp crack of energy bolts hitting walls and bodies. "We need to move, now." Ben turned to the crew. "I know a path to the shuttle bay. If we go quickly, we can get out while they're busy fighting each other." Carl was already moving toward the door, and Sam followed. Danny hesitated, looking at Jack. "Come on," Ben said. "This is our chance." Jack looked toward the nursery. Through the connecting doorway, he could see the larvae in their soft beds. Many were still sick, waiting for treatment. The caretakers moved among them, frightened by the sounds of battle but refusing to leave their charges. "I can't," Jack said. Ben stopped. "What?" "The larvae, they'll die without the treatment. I can't leave them." "Jack, listen to me." Ben stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. "This isn't our fight. These aren't our people. In about 10 minutes, warriors are going to come through that door and they're going to kill everyone they find. Do you understand?
I understand.
Then move. Jack shook his head. I've spent the last week watching those children suffer. I've given my own blood and bone to save them. I'm not going to walk away now just because it's dangerous. Ben stared at him. For a moment, Jack thought his captain might grab him and drag him away by force. Instead, Ben cursed under his breath and turned to the others. Get to the shuttle. I'll be right behind you.
Captain, Carl started.
Go, that's an order. The crew ran. Ben stayed, looking at Jack with a mixture of anger and something else, maybe respect. You're going to get yourself killed.
Probably.
Jack walked toward the nursery. You should go, Ben, get the others out. And tell everyone back home that I left my medic to die alone on an alien station. Ben shook his head. That's not a story I want to tell.
Amy appeared beside them. I'm staying too.
Amy, no. Don't waste time arguing. We need to prepare. They worked fast. Jack showed Amy how to administer the treatment while Ben blocked the doors as best he could. The sounds of fighting grew closer. Through the windows, they could see flashes of light as warriors clashed in the corridors. A caretaker named approached Jack. The human who bleeds for us, she said. Her voice was shaking. Why do you stay?
Because someone has to, Jack said. Help us. We need to treat as many larvae as we can before they get here.
The caretakers joined them. Old ones, young ones, all working together. They moved from bed to bed, giving the treatment to sick larvae. Some were too far gone. They died as their caretakers held them, but others grew stronger. Their movements became steady. Their tiny mandibles clicked with new life. The doors burst open. Warriors poured into the laboratory, weapons raised. At their head was Commander. His armor was marked with fresh burns from battle, but his eyes blazed with victory. The human, he said when he saw Jack. Still here. I expected you to run like the prey you are. Jack stepped in front of the nursery entrance. Amy and Ben stood beside him. Behind them, the caretakers huddled around the remaining larvae. These children need help, Jack said. Let us finish the treatment. Made a sound of disgust. You think I care about weakness? The sick larvae should die. It is nature's way. Only the strong deserve to survive. They're your own people, your own children. They are a reminder of our queen's failure. Raised his weapon. Step aside, human. My fight is not with you, but I will kill you if you make me. Jack didn't move. In the queen's throne chamber, the battle was nearly over. Queen Ra stood before her throne, surrounded by the last of her loyal guards. Warriors filled the room. Bodies lay everywhere. Entered, leaving his warriors to deal with the humans. This moment was his. He had dreamed of it for decades. Your reign is over, he told the queen. You have grown soft. You have forgotten what made us strong. You invited lesser creatures into our sacred places. You begged them for help like a wounded animal. The queen stood tall despite everything. Her voice was cold. I did what was necessary to save our children. Children who should have died. We are Ani. We do not accept weakness. We do not accept help from prey. He stepped closer. Your line ends today. Before he could strike, a sound filled the chamber. Footsteps. Hundreds of them. Everyone turned to see a flood of bodies pouring through every entrance. The caretakers had come. Every caretaker in the palace, hundreds of them, filled the throne room. They carried no weapons. They wore no armor, but they positioned themselves between and their queen, forming a wall of soft bodies and gentle hands. Stood at the front. Her old body trembled, but her voice was clear. The human bleeds for our children, she said. He gives his body to save them. He suffers pain he does not have to suffer. He stays when he could run. She looked at with eyes that had seen generations of Ani come and go. What have you sacrificed, Commander? What have you given except anger and pride? Snarled, you are caretakers, the lowest caste.
You dare stand against warriors. We dare stand for our children." The warriors looked at each other. They had been raised by caretakers. Every Ani had. These soft, gentle creatures had fed them, held them, protected them when they were weak and small. And now those same creatures stood ready to die, to protect a human, who had shown more love for Ani children than their own commander. One warrior lowered his weapon, then another, then more. Watched his support crumble. "Cowards," he spat, "all of you weak, pathetic cowards." He turned and ran. A few loyal warriors followed him. The rest stayed, weapons down, heads bowed. In the nursery, Jack watched as the warriors in front of him received a message through their communicators. Their stance changed. Their weapons lowered. "Commander has fled," one of them said. "The Queen commands us to protect the humans." Jack let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Amy grabbed his arm. Ben laughed, a short, shocked sound. Through the window, Jack could see the palace beginning to calm. The fighting was over. But somewhere out there was still free. And Jack knew that men like him never gave up easily. 3 weeks passed. The sickness was beaten. Every larva who had survived long enough to receive Jack's treatment was now healthy and growing. The nurseries were filled with the sounds of clicking mandibles and busy caretakers, happy sounds that had been missing for too long. Jack spent those weeks finishing his work. He trained Ani doctors to make the treatment themselves, using synthetic compounds that didn't require human bone marrow. It was slower, but it worked. The Ani would never need human help for this sickness again. When the work was finally done, a message came to the Starward Hope. The Queen requested Jack's presence in the throne chamber, one last time. Amy insisted on coming. So did Ben. They walked through corridors that had been cleaned of all signs of battle. New guards stood at every post, but they no longer looked at the humans with hostility. Some even nodded as they passed. The throne chamber was filled with nobles, but this time the atmosphere was different. There was no clicking of hungry mandibles, no whispered insults. The crowd watched with something close to respect. Queen Ra sat on her throne of crystal. She looked tired. Ruling an empire and surviving a coup would exhaust anyone, but her eyes were sharp, and when she saw Jack, she rose. A gasp ran through the chamber. The Queen never rose for anyone. She moved down from her throne, each step slow and heavy. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship. She stopped in front of Jack and looked down at him with those massive, glowing eyes. Then she did something that made every noble in the chamber freeze with shock. She spoke in human words, not through a translator, in her own voice, rough and strange but clear. "You gave pain for our young." Each word was careful, practiced. "Why?" Jack met her gaze. "Because they needed help, that's enough reason." The Queen was silent for a long moment. The entire chamber held its breath. "My people have conquered many worlds," she said, returning to her translator for the longer speech. "We have ruled through strength and fear. We believe that power came from taking, from crushing, from showing no mercy." She turned to address the crowd as well as Jack. "But this human taught us something we had forgotten. True strength is not just the power to destroy. True strength is also the courage to heal, to suffer for others, to give when you have every reason to take." She reached toward her own body and pulled something free from beneath her armor. It was a small pendant made of crystallized resin, golden and glowing faintly. Inside, Jack could see a single drop of liquid that shimmered with inner light. "This contains royal nectar," the Queen said. "It is given only to those the throne considers true friends. In our entire history, we have never given it to someone outside our species." She placed the pendant in Jack's hand. "You are the first. Anywhere in our empire, this will mark you as a friend to the throne. No Ani will harm you. No door will be closed to you. This is my gift." Jack looked at the pendant. It was warm in his palm like a living thing. "Thank you," he said, "but I didn't do this for a reward." "I know, that is why you deserve one." The queen straightened and spoke to the chamber. Let it be known throughout the empire. Humans are no longer to be classified as a lesser species. We will open formal relations with their worlds, trade agreements, non-aggression treaties, cultural exchange. She looked at Jack one more time. You have changed everything, human. I do not think you understand how much. The audience was over. Guards escorted Jack and his friends back to the Starboard Hope, which had been repaired and restocked with supplies. The entire crew was waiting, eager to leave but also amazed at everything that had happened. Ben shook his head as they walked toward the ship. I still can't believe it. We came here as prisoners. We're leaving as honored guests. More than that, Amy said. We're leaving as the people who changed how an empire sees our entire species. Danny was practically bouncing with excitement. Wait until we tell everyone back home. They're never going to believe it. They boarded the Starboard Hope. Everything was exactly as they had left it, except cleaner. The Ani had even fixed some problems the crew had been meaning to repair for months. Jack went to the medical bay and sat down on his old chair. It felt strange to be back, strange and good. Amy found him there a few minutes later. She leaned against the doorway. You know, she said, when they took you away, I thought I'd never see you again. I thought for sure they were going to kill you. So did I. But you stayed anyway. In the nursery when you could have run. You stayed for children that weren't yours, that weren't even human. Jack thought about the larvae, about the small one who had been the sickest. He had seen before they left, healthy and strong, playing with his siblings. The tiny creature had clicked at Jack in what said was thanks. They were just kids, Jack said. Scared and sick and suffering, it didn't matter what species they were. Amy smiled. Ben says that's what makes humans terrifying. What do you mean? He said other species conquer with weapons and ships. They build empires with fear and force. But humans, she laughed softly, we conquer with compassion. We make people love us. And that's way more powerful than any army. The ship's engines hummed to life. Jack felt the familiar vibration through the floor as the Starboard Hope lifted off from the docking bay. Through the window, he watched the orbital palace shrink behind them. Somewhere in there, a queen was making plans that would change the galaxy. Trade routes would open, borders would soften, and maybe, someday, Ani children and human children would play together without fear. All because one medic refused to walk away from suffering. The stars stretched into lines as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Jack leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He thought about what the Queen had said, that he didn't understand how much he had changed. Maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he never would. But he knew one thing for certain. When he had walked into that throne chamber, alone and afraid, he had been just a man. A simple medic on a cargo ship, nobody important. Now he was something else. A symbol, a bridge between worlds, the human who taught an empire that kindness was not weakness. The Starboard Hope flew on through the darkness between stars, carrying its crew toward home. Behind them, 12 star systems were waking up to a new future. And somewhere, far away, a small larva named was growing stronger every day, clicking happily in a nursery full of life, never knowing that his survival had changed everything. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest choices. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to stop caring. Jack Cole had made that choice, and the galaxy would never be the same.